Hello everyone, and happy Mother's Day. Yes, I'm aware that Mother's Day has passed for the year, but I argue that every day is Mother's Day. Thank you. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about 5 historical queen mothers of kingdoms located in present-day Uganda. Why queen mothers and not queens? Well, it's because being a queen sounds great, and it does bring respect and power, but the thing is, there was only one queen mother. An African king had multiple wives, and took every opportunity to, sow his royal oats. So given their circumstance, it was unlikely that they would be that influential. And unfortunately, after a king's death, some kingdoms in the region would require the death of the wives, as we shall see. But to be the mother of the king, the man above all men, that position came with incredible power. Obviously, this power of the queen mother was derived from that of the king, and so it was the case that mothers of princes did everything in their power to ensure the success of their sons. In her paper, History of Motherhood, Food Procurement, and Politics in East Central Uganda to the 19th century, Rhiannon Stephen points out that a queen mother's power lay in her ability to influence others, namely her son, his queen sister, and the chiefs. She would also need to be able to rally her fellow clansmen so she could count on their support should there be need for fighting. And no better example comes to mind than the queen mother of Buganda, the Namasole herself, Muganziraza. Number 1. Muganziraza, mother of Kabaka Mutesa I. Kabaka Mutesa is the most famous king of Buganda. He ruled Buganda during a time of incredible change in the region, coming into contact with the European explorers and Arab slave traders. He even wrote a letter to Queen Victoria of England, which was published in the Daily Telegraph. The letter apparently was imploring the Queen to send more missionaries, paper, ink, and pens because his had run out. You know what? Let's read it together. I'm just gonna open it up here and... oh my god! This newspaper where his letter was published was a massive block of text. There were almost no page breaks, they used the tiniest font ever, and paragraphs were almost non-existent. It's almost as if the Victorians hated reading. Yeah, we're actually gonna skip this. Thank you. This video is about the mothers anyways. So, to begin, Muganziraza was not his mother. She actually adopted Mutesa. His real mother was another wife of his father, Kabaka Suna. The Kabakas had a wife from each of the 50 clans of the Buganda state. His birth mom was a Gwolyoka of the Sheep clan, and J.M. Gray tells us that she was not one of Suna's preferred wives. She apparently disgraced herself by doing something uncouth. What it was is never revealed. But it was bad enough that her husband, the king, sold her into slavery to the Arabs. Before she was taken, she asked her co-wife Muganziraza of the Elephant clan to raise him. She did. Later, Mutesa would make every effort to get her back, but he never found her. You'd think that given that Mutesa's mom was sold into slavery that he would be sympathetic to the victims of it. But no, Mutesa would sell many others to the Arabs when he became king. So, I don't really know what to say about that. Slight interjection here. Allow me to offer an opposing view. You see, according to Mukasa, a prominent Buganda chief, Mutesa's mother being sold into slavery was a rumor. A rumor spread by a disgruntled chief who had been promised that his nephew would succeed. According to Mukasa, Gwolyoka was indeed one of the wives of Suna, and that she was given away to the Arabs rather than sold. Here, Gwolyoka is a name and not a title like J.M. Gray writes. Mukasa said, "A king only sells ivory, not people." Now, this is interesting, given that it flies contrary to the overwhelming evidence which shows that the Kabakas did indeed sell their enemies into slavery. But it's important to provide opposing views. So, back to the episode. Kabaka Suna would later die of smallpox. Muganziraza and her clan, with the help of Suna's Katikiro, the prime minister, made plans to install him as king. It is curious, though, why she never chose her own child. Did she have a son? Children of her own? Mutesa overshadowed all of them. They went to great lengths to back him up, starting with locking up all of his 61 brothers while they gained power. Can you guys imagine the amount of planning, effort, and careful precision that went into sequestering 61 princes? These weren't regular folk. They were princes, members of the royal family. most, if not all, had factions backing them up in this contest, protecting them. How did she and her allies manage to pull this off? Muganziraza seems to be somewhat of a tactician. It's incredible. Well, the princes didn't think that because by 1875, all but 2 had been starved to death while being imprisoned. Yikes. As far as deaths go, being starved to death is a horrible way to die. When the explorer John Speke met Namasole Muganziraza, which would have been around 1861, he described her as being around the age of 45. He also said that she was fat and had a fair complexion. Muganziraza was very powerful when her son finally sat on the throne. So powerful, in fact, that Speke believed that she had more power than her son the king, a fact that would put her in direct conflict with him. It wasn't long before Mutesa began to push back, killing his mother's chiefs in a demonstration of power. Mutesa truly showed why he inherited his father's name, Okabia, the bringer of tears. Despite being humbled, Muganziraza still maintained power, but mostly over those in her domain. She could no longer control her son like she had hoped. But despite this tension, Mutesa did love his mother very much. We see this demonstrated when she died in 1882. Mutesa spent an exorbitant amount of money and payment to give her a proper burial. She was buried in innumerable bark cloths, 4 coffins, 1 made of copper and 3 made of wood. Muganziraza was given a very, very, very lavish send-off. So lavish that the English missionary Alexander Mackay estimated that the amount paid for cloths was about 40,000 francs, which translating that to dollars today is about 60,000 USD. Insane. Number 2. Queen Mother Kanyange Nyamutahingurwa Aboli, mother of Omukama Kabalega of Bunyoro. Kanyange was brought to Bunyoro as a prisoner when her home in Bulega was raided by Bunyoro warriors. Bulega is in present-day DRC. At the time, it wasn't part of what was considered Bunyoro, but it later became part of the kingdom when Kabalega took over. It's obvious why Kanyange was taken. I mean, other than the fact that she was a prisoner of war, she was said to be very beautiful. Her name, Kanyange, comes from the root word nyange, which means egret. So she was beautiful like the bird. Her other name, Nyamutahingurwa, was probably given to her when she was taken. It means a woman who is admired and noticed by any man. Basically, she was a head-turner. But the thing about this is, in Nyakatura's book Anatomy of an African Kingdom, Kanyange and Nyamutahingurwa are 2 separate people. Kanyange, or Nyangi as Nyakatura calls her, was the mother of Kabalega. Nyamutahingurwa, God, I am butchering that to death. Oh, God help me. Nyamutahingurwa was his grandmother, the mother of his mother, Kanyange. Whoever is right, I don't know. But in any case, Kanyange was a member of the Banyoza clan and was also a daughter of the king of Bulega. Adefuya says that she was a palace maid, which is probably where Kamrasi, Kabalega's father, met her. She became his wife, and together they had Kabalega, which meant he of Bulega, referring to where his mother was from. When Kamrasi died in 1869, she was to be buried along with her dead husband, which was the custom among Bunyoro for the king's wives. But she ran away and hid herself, which, whew, I can understand, because if you're imagine being told that you're going to be buried alive with your husband, and you're like, what? I don't think anyone is sticking around for that. The thing that confuses me about this, though, is that we know that mothers are very important to the princes. It's hard to believe that any of them would stand there idly by and watch as their mothers were buried alive, custom or not, especially if one of them became king. I don't know, it just seems so unlikely. So I'm not exactly sure to what extent these customs were practiced. In any case, Kanyange later came back wearing a disguise so she could see her son. By this time, Kabalega was king. We don't know when in the timeline she came back, but it's said that a tree grew where she stood, and this was taken to be a sign that Kabalega would be overthrown, which was hardly revelatory news because, as we know, Kabalega was faced with constant threats to his authority, both from other princes and from the outside. Now, clearly, she was welcome back because many of the people Kabalega picked for chieftainships were of his mother's clan, the Banyoza. This is something we've talked about before. A king's mother's clan are his most important allies, more so than his father's side. We've seen this so far in Busoga and Bunyoro, which had to do with the fact that they had a lot to gain by ensuring the success of their candidate. Whereas on the father's side, you would find the royal clan, who had many of their own interests to worry about. Queen Mother Kanyange had authority of some kind. She was given land to rule, and she also had an army of her own. In the book Twilight Tales of the Black Buganda, Ruth Fisher mentions that she sent an army of her own to fight Kabaka Mwanga's men in the Battle of Kangaho. This was fought in 1885. They were different from other warriors in that instead of using spears, they used garden hoes to hack their enemies, which would have been a very horrifying weapon to be attacked with. I mean, a spear is terrifying, but a garden hoe? Jesus. Like, if I had to pick between being stabbed or hacked, I'd rather be stabbed than hacked to pieces, for sure. Kanyange also appears to have been among her son's advisors. For instance, when Lugard offered peace, with quotation marks, Kanyange was in the room as they discussed what to do. Nyakatura tells us that Queen Mother Kanyange, or Nyangi, was the leader of the group of advisors who supported peace with Lugard and Kabaka Mwanga. This is what she had to say to the king.
I am not trying to deprive you of your throne, but choose the sack, for it can be used for trade, or the hoe, so that the people may plough the land with it. Moreover, as you are rich and have children, you will probably need more food. What good ever comes out of war? I have delivered my soul. The men can now speak.
The items she mentions are a reference to the things Kabaka Mwanga sent, that Kabalega was to pick from. Based on what he picked, they would know whether it was peace or war. Interestingly, on the other side of this was Nyamutahingurwa, her mother, and she vehemently opposed her daughter's suggestion of peace. She said,
"Impossible. Since when has any Omukama befriended Baganda? Do not let yourself be deceived by them. They have always been our enemies, a people only interested in raiding other countries. Do not allow them to fool you. A man is always ready for the worst. We are here to fight for you against Baganda. Please, do choose the gun."
And Kabalega went to war against his mother's advice. The consequences of Kabalega's decision would be felt for years to come. This decision drew him into a protracted full-scale war against the British Empire that lasted till 1899. The Bunyoro suffered heavy losses. Imagine if Kabalega hadn't fought, the lives that would have been spared. He is a hero for fighting for his nation's sovereignty, but man, they suffered a lot. I talked about this in the Kabalega episode and the next one. That would have been about episode 9 and 10, so check it out. Or if you want to read more, the sources are in the podcast description box. Despite her son's decision to choose war, Kanyange stuck by her son to the end. On May 6, 1895, she was captured by Captain Trevor Turner. This was considered by the British to be a major blow to Kabalega. They hoped that it would scare the other chiefs who were still resisting into submitting to them. Now, Kanyange showed them that she was all about peace, love, and anti-war, and blah blah blah, and that she would love for her son to stop fighting. They thought she would be a great ally in the same way that other chiefs had been, like Byabachwezi. But soon, they realized that actually, Kanyange was, open quotes, a disquieting influence and a means by which information was transmitted to Kabalega, close quotes. Basically, she was spying for her son. Surprise! She would keep him up to date on what the British were planning since she was now close to them. But yeah, they eventually found her out, and Kanyange was moved to Buganda for safekeeping. And that is the last bit of information that I could find on Queen Mother Kanyange. Number 3. Queen Mother Kabalu of Luuka, mother to Tawinga Wambuzi Munhana of Luuka State of Busoga. Kabalu was the daughter of a Munhana clan family. They settled in a region north of the Luuka State. This is one of the many chiefdoms of Busoga in the pre-colonial era. Luuka also shares a founder with another Busoga state called Chiguru. See episode 2 of the Busoga series for more on that. Kabalu's family settled north of Luuka in a land not yet in control by the state. For some reason or another, they needed an alliance with Luuka, and so they offered their daughter Kabalu in marriage to Tabingwa Ihensiko I before he became king. He accepted, and made her one of his wives. Ihensiko must have really liked her because by the time he inherited the throne, Kabalu became his senior wife. To be a senior wife meant to be in the highest position among the king's wives. You kept them in order, addressed their concerns, you were the queen. And so Kabalu's child Wambuzi eventually succeeded his father Ihensiko as king. What makes Kabalu so interesting is the role she came to play during Luwuka's weakest periods in the 19th century. The first time is when Luwuka found itself unwittingly at war with Buganda. What prompted this attack, you might ask? Well, certainly nothing they did, but it all started with them meddling kids. I'm kidding. There were so many pieces to the story that I'm just going to attempt to give you the TLDR, too long to read version of the story. It all started when a king of the neighboring kingdom to the west of them decided that he was going to expand into the territory of the kingdom of Buganda. In an unbelievable display of force, Buganda, of course, retaliated and burned down their capital. But they decided that it wasn't enough, and so they marched eastwards towards Luwuka and burned down Wambuzi's capital. Thankfully, Wambuzi had heard of their advance and fled to his mother's people. This is where Kabalu comes into play. She protected her son as Buganda warriors occupied Busoga for several months. But she also did something that was very, very, very impressive. During this occupation, some of King Wambuzi's brothers got in their heads that now was the time to seize the throne. They attempted to collude and make backdoor deals to secure the alliance of Buganda. Queen Mother Kabalu was determined to put a stop to that, and she did. Her son's brothers actually listened, which is very impressive and significant. I've yet to see something like this in any of the stories in the Interlacustrine area. We have so many stories of brothers turning on brothers in an attempt to have their time in the limelight, but never were they told by the Queen Mother to knock it off and actually stopped. Kabalu ended up restoring her son Wambuzi to the throne, marking just another example of her protecting her son's power. Historian David Cohen even says that she was responsible for ensuring the initial success of her son. Another thing that makes this even more significant is the fact that she wasn't just dealing with the ambitions of the princes, but she was dealing with the ambitions of their mother's clans. Just like she had done, they wanted to rise up too. Her family went from being a small unknown group to a large relevant clan with various connections and the political capital to get other clans to shelf their own ambitions. Kabalu was so powerful that she even ruled Luwuka during the interim period while her grandson was being prepared to be the king. Number 4. Queen Mother Chiboga of Nkore, or Ankole, mother to Ntare V. Ntare V, or Ntare II, as referred to by Nyakatura, was the 24th king of the Nkore state. His mother was Queen Mother Chiboga, who was a princess from a much smaller territory called Busongora. According to Nkore historian Samwiri Karugire, there is conflicting information on her past. Some sources say that she was captured from Busongora after a raid by Mutambuka, the predecessor of Ntare V. She was then married to Mutambuka. Other sources state that Mutambuka negotiated the marriage of Chiboga, but not for himself, but for his eldest son, Bachwa. Nkore was very involved in the politics of the state of Toro, which had authority over the territory of Busongora. And thus there is confusion whereby some say that Ntare was Mutambuka's son, while others say that he was the grandson. But Chiboga is who we're most interested in. Not much is known about her, like most on this list, but she is named in a very important episode in Bunyoro/Toro/Nkore history. In 1876, Kabarega, or Mukama of Bunyoro, attacked Toro in an effort to bring them back to the kingdom. Toro had seceded earlier from Bunyoro in 1830. After the attack, 3 Toro princes escaped to Nkore. These were Kasagama, Musuga, and Kamurasi. Kabalega heard of their escape and sent a message to Queen Mother Chiboga, who was a Muvito princess, meaning that she was a member of the royal clan, the same royal clan that ruled Bunyoro, Toro, and Busongora. The historian Shane Doyle tells us that she received a bouquet of flowers which had an encoded message. He documented that Babito had a way of communicating using flowers. Upon receiving them, Queen Chiboga understood the assignment and executed 2 of the princes who were seeking refuge in her kingdom. Karugire says that as the princess of Busongora, Chiboga was very involved in the disputes of the area, disputes that probably involved Tora's hegemony over Busogora, which would explain her willingness to participate in the murder of 2 of their princes. The only one who survived was Kasagama, who then escaped to Buganda. Number 5. Queen Nyakairu of Nkore, wife to Mutambuka. Yes, I know, another one from Nkore, and this time it's a queen. I know, this episode is about the queen mothers, but man, allow it. And this story was too funny and interesting for me to pass up. Now, it's said that in the 1860s, Nyakairu got sick of her husband Mutambuka and left him. Karugire tells us that she left him for a rival prince by the name of Rwegira of the state of Karagwe. Now, we are not told how or when they struck this little Romeo and Juliet romance. All we know is that Nyakairu felt strongly enough about him that she sent a message to her left-behind husband. She said, "You ain't shit, you never been shit, and never will be shit." I'm just kidding, of course, but she might as well have. Nyakairu sent a message to her ex-husband telling him that she was now with a king who was just as magnificent as he was. If you're thinking that this is the part where Mutambuka loses it, you would be wrong. Nyakairu added that not only was her new man better than him, but that he also, get this, stammered while getting into bed. I know, random, but stick with me here, we're going places. Karugire explains in the footnotes that it was a desirable trait in Nkore culture for a man to stammer. The reason for this was because stammering stopped people from talking too fast, and fast talkers were considered to be improper. For context, this is how fast Rhiannon can sound. Now, I don't know what he's saying, but it sure sounds fast to me. Nkore speakers, if he's saying anything crude, my apologies. So in Nkore culture, a man like John Mashita, who once held the Guinness World Record for fastest talker, would have a hard time fitting in.
At what point did you realize you had this gift?
Well, when I was 12 years old, growing up on Long Island, there was a cerebral palsy fair a few blocks away from my house, and they announced that they would donate $2,000 to cerebral palsy for anyone that broke a Guinness record. So at first I wanted to ride the roller coaster at Coney Island, so I called Coney Island, and they said, "Hey kid, take a hike at 12 years old. We're not going to let you strap yourself into the cyclone for 2 weeks straight." So I went home and I started flipping through the book and decided I wasn't going to eat a car, swallow lead pipes. So the next best thing was to lock myself in a room and teach myself how to do the fast talking. I also grew up in a family with 5 sisters, so to get a word in edgewise, it was self-defense.
Did you catch any of that? My man can talk. Jeez! And that's John Mashita, by the way. Anyways, back to the story. But what catches my eye is that he says stammering before he gets into bed. Okay. What about the bed? Why mention the bed? Are they, like, how did it work? Did he have to stammer right before he got into the bed? Like, good night, babe, and then get into the bed, and then she'll go like, "Oh my god, you're so hot." Like, is that how it worked? So what I'm guessing is that this was a dig against his sexual prowess. I don't have any proof, but that's just what it sounds like to me, which conjures up all sorts of hilarious scenarios in my mind. Karugire writes that Mutambuka was enraged because his wife suggested that he was a less desirable husband than Rwegira. Mutambuka assembled his men, and the mission statement was to get his wife back. He sent his wife a message saying, "I will be visiting Rwegira soon," a message which she relayed to her now new husband. Nyakairu told Rwegira, but he didn't seem to take it too seriously. He is said to have responded with, "Can Mutambuka drink the Kagera River dry?" Meaning that there apparently was no chance that Mutambuka would make it across the Kagera River. Poetry. I like it. And no, he can't, but he can certainly swim across, or use a boat. Whatever method he used, Mutambuka found a way across and ransacked and burned to the ground Rwegira's residence. Now, this is what people get for talking too much. By this time, it's said that Nyakairu had given up and made her way back to her husband, Mutambuka. Yeah, I know, it's not an uplifting story of queen motherhood, but it is a very interesting one. In any case, that is all for today. For the list of sources, you can see them on the screen or in the YouTube description box. For those listening on the podcast, you can find them in the show notes. My name is David Ibanda, and this is the show Those Who Came Before Us. Peace.